Thanks for joining Leadership Rediscovered, a podcast devoted to all things leadership. I'm your host, Laura Siebold, founder and president of Shine Consulting. And each episode, I interview different leaders from different walks of life and different industries to learn about their unique definition of leadership. And today I'm very excited because I have Justin Thompson, who is the founder, sole owner, and CEO of Senergy. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yep.
So I learned about you from the Children's Hospital Gala. You were given the Community Service Award for 2024, which we can talk about maybe a little bit later on, but it led me down the rabbit hole of trying to learn a little bit more about you. And you said that you were passionate about leadership. So seemed like the right person to put in the hot seat today.
Well, I hope so. I just don't have high expectations, but yeah.
No, it's good. So usually I just like to start off by having each person talk a little bit about their leadership journey, or it can just be your story in general. So, help us get to know you for individuals who are watching, listening, that don't know who you are, anything that you're willing to share just to bring your bio to life a little bit.
Yeah, and I think it works really well for the purposes of this. So yeah, I grew up in Southern West Virginia.
Oh, okay.
Right out of high school, I left there and did active duty military. So enlisted right out of high school, active duty military. And obviously leadership is a huge part of the military.
Yes.
And from almost the very first day when I got to basic training, I don't know why, but I was chosen as a leader in a leadership role as a student leader, I think they called it.
Oh, wow.
And that continued all the way through. And again, don't know why. I don't know if it was because I was one of the tallest guys or what it was.
He looks intimidating.
Yeah, he looks like he'd be a leader. But anyway, and it was just natural. Prior to that, I don't know. I didn't play high school sports or anything, so I didn't see really anything stand out there. But it just happened. So yeah, the military was a huge part of it, and I've carried that and studied that, and as I told you, I was passionate about it. I've read about it, and yeah.
That's awesome. Yep. I'm excited. Okay, tell us a little bit about your role, because I feel like the industry that you're in, the company that you own, that doesn't seem like something that you just one day wake up and you're like, I think I'd like to, go into this business, or I think I'd like to be responsible for 700 and how many employees?
It fluctuates, but it's around 700, yeah.
A lot of people. So I would love to hear a little bit more about how you got to where you are right now.
Yeah, it's hard to believe, honestly. I tell this story and I can tell people are like, there's some skepticism. Is this guy real? Because it literally waking up one day and deciding in the middle of 2020 and all things COVID lockdown. And it's like, I'll just go do this. I always jokingly say a lot of people they found themselves, they took on a new hobby or learned something new, a foreign language, whatever. And I just decided to go buy a coal mine. But anyway,
that's awesome.
we all navigated the pandemic.
Yeah, I took up roller skating, but whatever.
Exactly. No, so I came back from the military. It's around 2004, call it. And at that time, coal and energy was doing really well. It's a strong market. There was a lot of demand. So I got into the industry there, decided that, hey, I really like this. So I'm gonna pursue this. It just kind of happenstance. I was had signed up with so going back in 2004, gotten out of active duty. I'm back in Southern West Virginia, my dad's, and had signed up to go back to the Middle East as a military contractor.
Oh, wow.
And was actually driving home from Charleston, where I had to send all my paperwork in down to Texas, and just happened to run into a guy and was like, hey, why don't you come work at the mine a little while before you go? And that's how it all got started.
Oh, my goodness.
And so from there, I ended up deciding, I got to go get a college degree if I'm going to do this. And so I ended up going to University of Kentucky, mining engineering degree, finished that up, came back, went to work, was living in Charleston. And then that fast forward to like 2010, 2012, somewhere in there, the industry was just going through a really hard time. There were a lot of bankruptcies. There was just this whole transformation happening. And at that time, I decided, well, if I'm going to have to do something different, I'm going to take a different path. I'm going to do something that is different. Yeah. And so I went to work took a job in Kentucky in Louisville with utility there. And that's how I got to Louisville, and that's why I still live there today, although I spent a lot of time here.
Yeah.
But yeah, just between call it 2010, in this industry, between there and 2020, there were so many iterations and so many, just navigating, because you're navigating a market. The industry went from 1.2 billion tons per year of production down to, I don't know, call it 400 million now. So more than cut in half. So you can imagine the companies closing and you just had to navigate it.
Yeah.
And I did a variety of things, worked for a variety of folks, teams, companies, and I actually started doing my own thing, some on the side, some consulting and otherwise.
Yeah.
But you fast forward to 2020, and the seller, the previous owner of this operation up here, I was talking to them and working with them, and they had made it. They were running a process and trying to find a buyer for these assets, and obviously it was 2020, and not a lot of companies were doing anything, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I
have many questions already.
Yeah, so I was talking to them, and I kept looking at the assets. I had some ideas about how a deal could get done.
Yeah.
And so I was working with, talking to them, and was even potentially at one conversation about actually going to work for them. Anyway, great people, great team, and I kept looking at these assets, and I see all these creative, synergistic opportunities.
Yeah.
I take this old mine, and we can get into that, all the things we've done there.
Yeah.
And anyway, in the final conversation, I was talking to them, and I said, I don't think you should sell this thing. I don't think, and like that's that, and I think they made the right decision ultimately for the strategic purposes of their business. But anyway, they did, and I said, and they couldn't find a buyer. And I said, hey, I'll take it. And so we ended up cutting the deal.
Wow.
And that was June or July. And then it took us till December to get it closed. There were
my goodness.
a lot of things came up. It was a big transaction.
That's a huge
and to
undertaking.
get it done in 2020, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's interesting to me. I mean, had you owned a business before prior
Small,
to that?
but nothing this scale.
I mean,
nothing
it's a big scale.
Been a part of managing them, right? And but yeah, overnight I went from literally having. There were 3 or 4 people that was behind the scenes helping me or with me.
Yeah.
Prior to close, but it literally at close went from call it 2 or 3 of us to. At that time, there were 500 and some employees, I believe.
Oh, my goodness.
Overnight.
That's a lot of responsibility
to
take on overnight.
Yeah, we have an employee to dependent ratio of about 3 to 1. So for every employee, there's,
Yes. Yeah.
It's a lot.
Okay, I want to talk about that too. Because I'm just sitting here thinking about, again, 2020, not great economically during that time frame. But then also you had just the industry. You've got a lot of people that are like, coal's dead and it's gone and it's done and saying a lot of things, negative things about it. So there's probably a lot of people that maybe were trying to get out and out of the industry or just energy in general, not even just coal, but just energy period. And I'm just curious to hear from you, like, what did you see? What positive did you see? Or what, obviously you saw something appealing about it when maybe others were moving away from it, you were moving towards it. So I'm just curious what you saw. Yeah,
so it kind of goes back. I'm not going to say that I really saw this play out. I didn't have this kind of foresight. My crystal ball's a little cloudy, but no, I did. I knew that I could see this coming. I think a lot of people could. Honestly, you just didn't know how to play it. But I think this goes back to several years. What was going on with government actions and regulations, shutting down fossil fuel, restricting supply, whether it's, obviously they have made their impact on coal, but coal's declined and natural gas replaced it.
Right.
Wasn't wind and solar and these other things that replaced it.
Right.
It was basically natural gas came on and replaced it. So you fast forward and then you see this wholesale momentum, right, between the government and the corporations and the markets going further and further into renewable energies and electrification, right? So at the same time, we're going to electrify everything in our lives.
And what actually powers that?
What keeps the grid stable and reliable, which we're now, and I'm excited that those conversations are happening now.
Yeah.
But going back in like 2018, 2019, 2020, you really saw it. ESG. I don't know if you're familiar with ESG. Okay.
Yeah.
So that
my background's in HR, so yeah, it's more from an HR perspective. But yeah, totally no. Yeah.
So I feel like that really took its place in the market.
Yeah,
and started
for sure.
Really, I mean, there were a couple of years there, maybe 3 years, that 18, 19, 20, where ESG it dominated the capital markets, right?
Yeah.
That was dictating decisions. And I just watched this, reading the Wall Street Journal, watching the business news, watching these transactions happen. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. And at the same time, you see these tech companies and all these other renewable companies launching IPOs, and they say they're pre-revenue. Yeah. What is pre-revenue? That sounds like a hobby, not a business, right?
Exactly,
so, and I see these large companies, doing things where you're basically, I mean, you look at ExxonMobil, right? Mm-hmm. One of the largest, strongest corporations in the world, right? And they at that time, due to all the rhetoric and the ESG, like they had just about systematically devalued it to zero. And and so you're watching this happen. I'm like, and like if you remember in 2020, you probably may not have followed, but oil actually traded negative.
Wow. I mean, I know it was way down, negative. But I didn't realize it was negative.
I mean, you see, so I'm seeing these things happen. You see the movement, like more electric cars coming. You're seeing the government, all this electrification. I'm like, I see a huge supply and demand imbalance coming, and you just want to be in the game at that time, because the barrier to entry is almost insurmountable for anybody to get in. New. Yeah. Like trying to get a permit for a new fossil fuel production, certainly a coal mine, is
pipelining.
It's very difficult. I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's extremely difficult. It takes a long time.
Yeah.
So you see the barrier to entry. So supply is not just going to respond.
Yes.
There's always going to be this. And now you have the geopolitical things that happened since then, and it's gotten really interesting. And now you're seeing a situation where FERC and all the other government agencies and otherwise talking about grid reliability is a real issue.
For sure.
A very real issue.
Especially if there's an intent for more electrification. You say that way better than I do. You probably say it more often than I do as well. But yeah, exactly. I mean, really understanding, and I think not everyone does understand what powers the engines that run things in homes and businesses and things that are, underground or out of sight, out of mind for people. I take for granted that if I, flip on a switch, lights come on, or if I turn on a faucet, water comes out, or, I heat up my gas stove and there comes the flame. So we kind of take for granted or don't necessarily understand, well, how did it get to that place, and make it so easy for us to just flip a switch or turn a knob and there it is. And we do kind of take for granted, I think, that it's always there.
We do. And I would say, I just had this conversation, I did an interview with the New York Times a few days ago. And so, for generations in America, you've had the fact that just that it's electricity is taken for granted. The just flip the switch and nobody knew where it came from. Nobody knows the units that it's measured in and it was really, really affordable. It was an afterthought on how much it cost for the most part, right? And that has changed. I mean, that's changed dramatically, right? It's almost the opposite of that. And but I would offer to you, given the resources that we have as a country, given the people and the machines and the natural resources and everything, that's the way it should be. Yeah. It should be an afterthought. This should not be a kitchen table conversation about, hey, can we afford our energy bills this month? Or where are we going to have energy? Because that is a reality in a large part of it, and it's becoming more and more common, right? Yeah. The rolling blackouts and the fact that and you see these things happening, and when you hear electrification, I just stop to think, like, where is this coming from, right? Because energy, if you look at it globally, energy is supplied in about roughly four different forms, right? Electricity is only about 25% of global energy consumption is in the form of electricity. You got oil, you got gasoline, you got diesel, you got all these other things, right? So when you talk about doing away with that, natural gas, and going to electrification, right? Everything, they're talking about electrifying commercial buildings, no more natural gas appliances, all this stuff.
Right.
Like, you're talking about having to produce arguably 4 times the amount of electricity that we do now.
Exactly.
Where's that coming from?
Already unstable, how's that going to work?
That's and I'm obviously all pro fossil fuels not because I'm some emotional investor, like I love coal and nothing else. I just don't know what else replaces it. When you come to terms with the fact that you can't store, other forms of energy do not store well, right? Electricity in the form of battery storage, that doesn't work well.
Yeah.
Natural gas, it can be stored, but not as there's nothing more secure and more reliable than right here in Morgantown, for example. You've got 2 power plants that they can store sometimes as much as 60 days worth of coal on hand, and the river can do what it does. You can have supply chain disruptions, and they just keep on producing.
Right.
That's really hard to replicate in other forms. And
yeah, that totally makes sense.
And it concerns me that we don't have a comprehensive energy policy and a plan about how are we going to replicate that, right?
Absolutely. Well, and I appreciate you sharing more about just kind of the strategic view that you had, the vision that you had in terms of where things were going, because I think it's a really cool example of someone who, again, where many people may see the challenge or the negatives of a situation and move away from it. Like, we got to get out of this industry, or this is too hard, or we're not making as much money as we used to. Let's get out. You were looking at it differently, saying, wait a second, I see opportunity. And I think that's important to think about that perspective.
It is. And I think, bringing it back to leadership, right? And I think there's a key trait here, that leaders have to have the courage, right, to not go along with the group think or the herd mentality, whatever.
Yeah.
You have to be bold and have original thoughts, and don't be afraid to be wrong, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're never going to accomplish anything if you're afraid of making a mistake, right?
Yeah.
And so, but trust your instincts, right? And look at it. If you listen to the mainstream media or the large group think, or even some of the politicians, right? Coal is gone. It's dead and gone. Well, let's look at that. In calendar year 21, we set a record for the amount of coal consumed globally. So more than any other time in the history of the world.
Wow.
We broke that record in 22, and I'm pretty confident the numbers are going to settle out that we broke it in 23.
Wow. That's amazing. But you're right. That's not the message that most of us hear.
No, it's gone, and no one's using it anymore. But there's so much more to that story. But I know we're not talking about energy, because I can talk about energy all day.
I know. We want to talk about you.
Leadership. Yeah.
Yes.
But again, getting back to leaders, like, leaders have got to have the courage to, like, I don't think you all are correct. I don't think I see it that way.
Yeah. And having courage is the right word, of being willing to step in a different direction that's not necessarily the way and the path that everybody else is going down, and recognizing that there's risk with that.
Absolutely.
I mean, like you said, you didn't have a clear crystal ball, so you weren't quite sure, but you obviously had a lot of industry experience. I mean, it wasn't, again, like you just kind of woke up one day and thought, like, maybe you did, but I mean, you had the experience and a lot to back up that decision. But at the end of the day, you were still taking a big risk in doing that.
Yes. Yes, it was.
And now, fast forward, so you said there were 500 and some individuals, now about 700. So, I mean, it's grown or growing. When you think about your role, I mean, and you talked about the ratio of the dependents as well. And I said, that's a lot of responsibility. I mean, I am curious to hear your perspective on leadership overall and just what role you do play. I mean, obviously we know your title, but as you kind of think about and define what really is your role and what is your responsibility in your own words.
Titles are so misleading for, I think, in many cases of leadership, whether you're a leader of whatever organization, certainly in business, and a sole proprietor, small business like this, you end up being about everything, right?
Yeah.
You're a counselor, you're a janitor, you're HR, you're everything. It depends on the moment and the time and who you're with. But my role is, I have viewed my role, and I think the primary thing that I have done and focused on is putting a team together. Bringing the right people into the business at the right time, putting them in the right role, and and it's more than just looking at someone's resume, like, oh, they've got the skill set. Absolutely. But you have to mesh personalities, right? You got to have, there's all sorts of things out there, emotional intelligence, all these things, and not to get into all those buzzwords, but there is something to that, right?
Those are my favorite buzzwords, so
yeah.
Feel free.
But yeah, knowing that like you got to put the right personalities and put people in the right roles and challenging people, right? Pushing people to, when you see potential in them, and I've done this, like, hey, you can do more. This is something you probably never thought of. You don't feel comfortable about this and you don't think you'll do well, but I'm telling you, I think you will, and I'll support you and help you. And that has been the biggest thing. And that's an evolution, right? Certainly, I think businesses go through cycles and then you obviously have to respond to the market and do things, but there's an evolution. It's almost an evolution in your culture, and that comes with people and changing roles and sometimes people coming and going, but I think that's been the biggest task over the past few years, and it was really hard if you think about it. I closed in December of 20, so you roll into 2021.
Still in the height of the pandemic.
Yes, we fought all of that, and then supply chain issues. I mean, it was brutal.
Wow. Plus, you're trying, because you bought a business that already had, different ownership, different leadership. So now you're having to come in and introduce yourself and decide, do I want to completely just copy paste what was already being done, or which usually is not the case. It's, I want to make some changes, and people were probably a little bit nervous or unsure, like, who is this guy and are we going to have jobs and what's going on? I mean, there's a huge amount of effort that goes into just trying to introduce yourself, set whatever your expectations are for people that are there, and help get them comfortable with you.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're the new guy.
Yeah. And in this case, to your point, this mine was put in by U.S. Steel in the 1970s. So you've got quite a culture there, quite a history there. And I roll in, and then a lot of these people, there's a tremendous, significant amount of them. It's like second generation working here, right?
Yes.
Their father may have retired there, whatever. Now they work there, and like they've been doing it their way for a long time. And now I'm going to show up and tell them, we're going to make some changes. There was a lot of resistance to change. It was an interesting, but that's all behind us now. I mean, everybody's we've came. There was a lot of common ground there. We went some ways and we came and but it's turned out really well. There's been a lot of change. A lot of people. And that's just part of it, right? A lot of people that, especially if they've been there for, I don't know, say they've been there for 15 years and we come in and we're going to do something wholesale different. A lot of people just, I'm not doing change. I'm going to go somewhere else.
Well, and I was going to ask if you're willing to do a little bit of a deeper dive on that, because I work with companies on this all the time, and it's like I'm constantly being asked to do change management training, which is hilarious to me, because it's just like people, there's such a resistance to change, yet all of us deal with change all day long. So you would think, and especially the pandemic, it was like the biggest change experiment of our time. You would think at this point we've all figured out how to do it, but it's really still challenging. So I mean, I would love to hear if you have any tips that you're willing to share with folks on how to overcome resistance or how to manage that part of it, because it is hard.
It's extremely hard. My approach to it, which I don't know is the right approach by any means.
It's all right.
But
seems like it's worked for you.
I generally approach it like once you come to the decision, let's say you got an employee and you want to change their role, and you know that they're going to be, you just have to sit them down and then be crystal clear about it and be direct with it. But also I think it's important, which we do, is like, I'm not going to throw you into this new role and not support you. Like, it's okay. It's okay if you make a mistake. We're going to learn together. It's when you make the same mistake over and over and we're not learning is when we're going to have a challenge. But
that's a different conversation.
That's a very different conversation. But no, you just have the courage to tell them, right? And give them the why. I'm big on, there's some books that I really read, and I go back to over and over. And some of my favorites, one is former Navy SEALs. I don't know if you've seen the Echelon Front and Jocko with us.
And Leif. Yes. Big fan. I've gone to their muster.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, very cool. So extreme ownership and I
started following those guys back in, seems like it was, I don't know, 2018, 19, something. Anyway, and that extreme ownership, I think's fabulous, right?
Yes.
And then Call Sign Chaos. I don't know if you read that book by Jim Mattis. Is a fabulous, fabulous
Dog?
read.
Is that Mad Dog?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What's it called? Call Sign
Chaos.
I gotta write that down.
And it's a great read as leadership. he largely wrote that with the audience being young military leaders, but obviously you can apply that to any part of your life. But it's pretty fabulous too. But yeah, you communicate your intentions, right, and then you give them the why.
Yes.
And the rest of it, yeah. But change is brutal. It's.
Well, and I feel like I interrupted you, but it almost sounded like you were starting to go down the road of some people. At some point, people have to take ownership for themselves in terms of whether I'm willing to buy into this or if I need to make a change. And I felt like you were starting to say, some people maybe decided like this, I don't want to play this in this game anymore because the rules are different and this isn't what I signed up for. And sometimes that is an element of it, as much as people don't like to talk about that or say it. I mean, sometimes like we all have to evaluate for ourselves. Hey, is this still working for me? Is this still something that I want to be a part of? Or
is it fulfilling? Was it? Yeah. Yep.
Do I buy into that or am I not comfortable with that anymore and want to do something different?
The first year, maybe even year and a half, we had a significant amount of that where I don't know for sure that there's no one ever just came out and said, hey, I'm not into the change, but we had a lot of people left the business that had been there and didn't necessarily want them to leave the business. Very talented professionals. And, but I think they were just not going to do any more change. And to some degree, I think there was some exhaustion there. They were fatigued, right?
Yeah.
Because they had gone through, in this particular case, they had gone through, probably somewhat of an emotional roller coaster, right? They were told that the mine was closing and their jobs, the mine was going to be finished up in December 22. And then I come along, I'm like, whoa, that's not so true.
And
we're going to look at things very differently. And I think some of that was like maybe a little too much crazy for them.
Probably. Well, yeah. And I do feel like, especially when you talk about multi-generations, there can be an element of, hey, listen, we've done it this way for a really long time and it's been successful. It's worked for us. And I think everyone's definition of successful might be different as well, but we're still here. We're still making money. So why, like, who are you to come in? You've not been here. Who are you to come in and change it? And that's a really challenging position to be in from a leadership perspective.
It is. And I spent a lot of time that first year, a lot of time up here in the mine and with the management team and really trying to, if you read some of those military books, it's decentralized command.
Yep.
Really trying to bring that kind of culture to the business and really trying to create a business that's full of entrepreneurs, right? Mm-hmm. People that think like an entrepreneur and behave and run their part of the business like it's their own business, right? And that was hard because that came with a lot of resistance and a lot of challenges because a lot of companies don't do that, right? It's more centralized command.
Right.
You submit your budget, you submit this, we'll analyze it, we'll make the decision, come back.
And we're going to hold information close to the vest and not share with you things that you really need to know to do your job and make good decisions.
That was one of the first meetings I had as I brought the entire management team together. Cool. I'm talking foreman all the way up to, the top level at the mine level management and brought them in and was like, you all know how much money you spend? Just in general, you might got to guess. They have no idea.
No.
I'm like, you know how much money you spend on this? And you are responsible for that department. Do you have any idea what you, like for example, you take one department manager up there, runs a $30 million a year business, right? That department will spend $30 million. And I've tried to get them to think like, you run a $30 million business. Right. Are you making $30 million decisions? Are you Put it in context, And when we saw people, and there were a lot of people that embraced that and felt empowered by that, and you could just watch them flourish, and that was extremely rewarding.
That's really cool.
But you could just see people respond. They were like, "Wow!" And now you go up there, and you'll hear guys in the hallway out there talking, and they're like having an investment analysis conversation out there.
Awesome.
Which is awesome, right?
That's awesome. Yeah,
it's really, really rewarding. Now it's been a lot of sweat equity in that.
Yeah.
A lot of pushing and a lot of challenging.
And a lot of educating, right? Because if you don't have a business degree, for example, it's a little bit harder sometimes to understand.
Oh, it can be totally intimidating.
The basic financial drivers of a business, and a lot of times I don't think people really think about how do we make money, what are our expenses, and especially if you're working in a role that's not income producing, well, who pays for my salary?
Yes.
If like I said, my background was in HR. I didn't bring revenue in for the business. So I'm working for people who are paying my paycheck. And I think sometimes we lose sight of, depending on what our role is in the company.
Absolutely.
We lose sight of really, how we influence either money coming in or money going out, or maybe a little bit of both. I always say, ideally, if you can figure out how to make and save money at the same time for your company, you're like a real valuable employee.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
But I think people don't take the time to even educate employees on that. And if they did, it would have such a positive impact on so many things, because then people would start running it like it was their own business and thinking about things a little bit differently.
Absolutely. And, that there's a book out there I've been meaning to read. I don't know if it's good or not, but was it The Best CEOs Are Lazy or something, or Lazy CEOs Are Best or something like that?
The sound of that title.
And I haven't read the book, but I think, I could see some logic in that. I could see the point in that, right? Is once you get your team thinking right, and this decentralized command, and like you do kind of just sit back and like, now you can give strategic direction lead. And that's extremely rewarding to get there. And I'm really, really incredibly proud of those, the folks up there, the team up there. Like there's little things too that have gone on, and you just, again, show up and they don't even have the financials. They don't know, they don't know what they don't know. And now you fast forward to where like the business manager, accounting manager up there will go and sit with these department managers for like half a day and go through their budget and go through their spending, and like they're having conversations. It's just really cool.
That is so cool. But that's huge. I mean, you're making you're making it sound really easy, and I know it wasn't, because in order to get there, you did have to spend a lot of time, and people in accounting did have to spend days and hours with people to explain to them. So I don't want to gloss over the fact that that's a journey to get there, but it's worth it, I think, if people are willing to spend time. Because again, I was in a large organization the other day, and some employees were very upset about requests that they made that didn't get approved, the financial requests. And I thought to myself, are they even aware of, hey, listen, if there's 5 departments in this organization and we have, $1 million total to give,
capital
but
allocation.
each department's asking for $1 million. Do they recognize that, hey, we only have this certain pot of money that we can allocate? And because we didn't approve your request, it's not because we don't respect you or don't think that you're worth it or you need it, but you just have to think about, we're not just supporting your department. We have these other departments that we have to support too. And, again, getting people a little bit more aware of what's going on in the business and what those financial drivers are. I can't emphasize it enough how important it is for changing and influencing the decision-making of employees, regardless of level.
It does. Absolutely does. And one of the things that I think we did that helped us be so successful getting that culture into the organization was we basically do zero-based budgeting. And that was something that they really, I wouldn't say that. I'd say largely was not in place when we got here.
Interesting.
Businesses, they just do the same thing year after year. It's kind of easy. Like you kind of get comfortable with your KPIs and your metrics. And as long as we're in that, we move. But we don't do that. And then we, and thanks to Tim Runyon, my chief operating officer, and others, I mean, we're just really data driven, really numbers driven. And maybe we take it too far at times. I admit that. So if anybody at the company is listening to this one day, I apologize. Sometimes, we go too far. But anyway, we really do. We built our budgeting to where about 80%, I would say roughly, sometime maybe approaching 90% of our business performance is calculated. Meaning there's a hard calculation where if we're going to spend X dollars to buy these widgets, we know what the drivers are on that. It's because we're going to do this activity. And so when we sit down and so when we did that, you roll that out, like now these department managers are working with the engineering. They're all working together. They have to come up with these calculated models, right? And that forced them to understand, well, if I do this, I need that part and and it costs this.
Right. And then what's the value? Is it worth spending that or not? Are we really going to get the return that we're looking for?
And we, it's not hard, right? Like I would tell the team all the time, like, we're not doing calculus.
No.
It's basic math. That's all we're doing.
No, I mean, if you can balance a checkbook, which like nobody really does anymore, but I mean, it's like those kind of skills, honestly. It's really not that hard in terms of just understanding. It's like calorie in, calorie out when you're, trying to lose weight, or, I mean, I wish I was trying to gain weight, but I know it's reverse for that, right? But it's the same kind of formula, and everyone has to at least think about they're somewhat involved in the finances of their household as well. So, you can correlate a lot of it to, all right, if you are bringing in X amount of dollars each month with a salary, but here's all your household expenses. If we have more expenses than we have income, that's a problem. What are you going to do about that, right? I mean, most people are at least aware of those kinds of decisions that are being made within their household. So I think sometimes that's an easy starting point for employees too.
It absolutely is.
Amazing.
For sure.
All right. I've probably obsessed about that enough, but I love that you brought that up, because that is something I'm passionate about, is helping people understand the business side of the business that they're working in, regardless of level, because I think the better informed they are, then hopefully they make better decisions, and more data-driven decisions.
And it's happened. I mean, we're there, and it's really, like I said, very rewarding, and it's really fun. Now you get to sit back and kind of coach them and guide them on, like, wait a minute, I'm thinking about that. But anyway, it's great.
And then they get
and then sometimes they come up with things like, hey, I didn't think of that. That's awesome. Go do it.
Yeah, and they get to use their entrepreneurial spirit or creativity or whatever they might have, whatever skills they have. And everybody has different ones. You were talking about personality. I mean, they're all bringing different things to the table. So then they can use all of that knowledge to have more of an impact in the business. And everyone wants to feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves and that they are making an impact. So that's huge.
And one thing I'll say is you think about expanding on that personalities and putting people in the roles and everything. The one thing, point I would like to make is, I think oftentimes, at least I experienced in my career, was it seemed like in business, you go through especially if it's a large company, a candidate will submit their resume to HR, right? Or somebody's trying to hire within the business will tell HR, hey, get me some candidates. And they're really making these decisions, these judgments based off of resumes. But if you really knew someone's story, right? If you knew more about their background, like, but were they raised with a single parent? With what kind of and that's some things that led me to some key hires and some hiring guys and putting them in roles that one could argue on paper they don't have enough experience for. But because I knew more about them and I knew who they were, it was very clear to me, like, no, that's a leader. That's someone who's driven, who has had to make things happen for themselves. Yeah,
that's interesting, because I used to work in recruitment, and I'd always be really curious. I would always interview military, because I feel like there's a lot of lessons. Not that everyone that comes out of the military is perfect or anything like that, but usually there's a level of discipline that's very helpful in the workplace. There's oftentimes, regardless of rank or level, leadership training, which you don't always find in companies or in the educational system, and a certain work ethic. But also, you think about people that have food service experience or different types of jobs that people have worked that, maybe, that was a really humbling experience for them, or family situations. I mean, you name it. There's a lot of things that go into it that can really speak to someone's character, and then they apply that to the work that they're doing. And sometimes those aren't things that you learn in school or from a certain degree. It's more of that life experience.
You do.
The school of hard knocks.
That's right. And it tells you a lot about their character, right? Their testament to wanting to succeed and to driving results and doing the right thing. And it's that's absolutely something that I wish we saw more of. Like I tell the guys, one of the things we've gone through up there, again, through this evolution, and we took employment from, I don't know, round numbers 500 to 700, but that doesn't tell the whole story, because as many people can tell you over the past few years, if you wanted to hire 100 people, you probably had to hire 300 to net 100, right?
Oh, yeah.
So we've had all these people coming and going to the business, and a lot of times, even grown men that work in an underground coal mine, they don't all get along, right? And they all, and certainly at times when he thinks we should do it this way, and he thinks we should do it this way, and anyway, but as I say to him, always like, hey, before we judge somebody, can we just take a minute and try to get to know them?
Yeah.
Like before you just absolutely dismiss that person. Like,
and right
I don't know,
on.
maybe he just found out that his mom has cancer. I don't know. Let's just get to know him real quick before
Yeah, and that's huge.
We've tried. It's tried. That's like I tell them also all the time. The hardest thing I know to do is be a human in this world, right? It's really hard to be human. Yeah. And we all have all these feelings and thoughts and everything going on. And we all get frustrated and everything else. But
that's so true. And that is, I mean, that's the challenge of having different personalities in the workplace is because we're all going to look at each other. I'm looking at you as trying to figure out how much you're like me or unlike me. And we're going to get along a lot better if you're exactly like me.
Absolutely.
Lord knows the world doesn't need more than one of me. So it's best that you're not. But I mean, and the more unlike me you are, the more challenge I'm probably going to have with you and be like, what's wrong with this Justin guy? Like, he just doesn't get it. Well, maybe I don't get it, and we're wired differently, and that's okay because when we're working on something together, there's the benefit of us not thinking about everything the same way.
Yeah.
So I'm very curious if I polled your leaders or the folks that work for you, how do you think they would describe your leadership style, or what would they say about you as a leader?
I've actually tried to get them, like we do performance evaluations.
Yeah.
And I've actually tried that no one's done it, but I would genuinely love to know. I'm like, you do it anonymously. Like I get no feedback. I get no feedback. I know,
because being at the top is a lonely spot.
Yeah, and I'm like, please tell me. I mean, and I tell them all the time, like, I will hold you accountable, but you have to hold me accountable too. Like if I tell you, you got to call me and tell me, hey, get this done. You said you would do this. What? So, but I would hope they would say it's, again, using the military analogies, which is about all I have anymore. That's all I read. But, it's generals eat last, right? I take care of the troops have to be taken care of first and try to lead somewhat servant leadership and also lead from the front. Like I'll tell the guys all the time, I'll never ask anybody to do anything that I won't do myself. And, sometimes I haven't got to do it as much over the past, I don't know, call it 6 months, but I used to go up here and, on a Sunday night, we were in 24/7 and just go in the mine and go help the guys do something that's unpleasant, right? That's something they don't normally do and don't want to do. And I'll just go in there and that's been really fun because a lot of those guys, it's hard to meet everyone, and certainly if they've only met me once, they don't remember. So that's been a lot of fun too, kind of like undercover boss to some degree. I was just going to say that. It feels like undercover boss. But it's not what I'm trying to do. It just happened, right?
You're not disguising yourself. You're just like, hey, I'm here to hang out and work a little bit with you. I'm sure you learn a lot doing that. I got to tell them all the time. I can't tell them how to do anything in there. I'm not the expert on anything under there, but I'll carry their tools for them. I'll help them. I'll go get them something to eat, and that's what I've really tried. The moments I've had, as I think of some of the larger moments when I've had to, bring the group together and kind of have that moment is, it's like they got to start working as a team, right? And it's not just executing on the business performance or whatever the project is. It's like, take care of one another. Look out for one another, right? Yeah.
If you notice that guy not behaving, if you notice Jim not behaving normal, like, won't somebody go ask Jim, are you okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, that's been hard. It's and you're also in this culture where, in this industry, and there are many others, right, where it's really, really tough industry, right? Everybody's tough. Nobody.
I know a lot of the stuff that you've been talking about, I'm sure you get eye rolls and like, this feels like feelings talk and we don't want to do feelings talk.
I'm sure they have. Yeah. I'm sure.
But we are all relational beings and we all do have emotions. And people would be surprised when you put, again, I don't know, round numbers, 500 men underground, largely men underground. Yeah.
They have a lot of thoughts and feelings. Yeah.
And that is a tough work environment.
And if every one of them's got a strong opinion.
You're working very closely with one another in potentially very dangerous situations. So this whole safety component of looking out for each other is really important too. Yes. Because you want to come out the same way you go in, but also you're cut off and somewhat isolated while you're there together. So I can only imagine What kinds of things happen underground?
It's yeah, but that's a podcast probably in itself for sure.
Absolutely. So I do want to talk about kind of how I started the whole conversation, but you were given the Community Service Award at the WV Children's Hospital Gala, and part of that stemmed from $1 million donation, but other things that you've done, and that's incredibly impressive. And so I do want to talk about just your passion around philanthropy, obviously what your commitment or intent is there in terms of just supporting the hospital. I know you all did concert tickets too, and I'm sure there's a lot of other activities that people probably don't even know about that you do from more of a charitable perspective. So I would just love to hear your perspective on that and why that matters to you.
Yeah. So I think one, it gets back to the principle about there's one thing about being a corporate citizen, all that stuff, but set all that stuff aside, right? There's just being a good human and doing good with what you've been given, right? To some degree. So yeah, we've had success, we've done well, and with that, we're going to do some good. And then when you stop to think about, I think where we've evolved to is trying to be a little something or trying to donate and support all these various. So you end up I think overextending yourself. So we really narrowed it down, and so we're going to focus on kids and veterans. That's just what we're going to do. We're going to narrow our focus. That's what we're going to do. And then I just happened to run into the folks that were raising the money for the Children's Hospital and so forth. And I thought, that's an incredible project, incredible thing that I think will transform certainly this region, but potentially the entire state, right? Yeah. You see other children's hospitals have become sort of a destination for, and who's more deserving than a sick child, right? Absolutely. So anyway, when I heard about that, I'm like, yes. I don't know, but it just something said yes, and it's like, yeah, that's going to be our mission, and yeah.
Well, and I appreciate, first of all, that was a very generous donation. I mean, it's not like you chose to give, $10. I mean, it's a big one, but you also, I think, took it a step further. I mean, you were focused on creating experiences for kids too. And I think there's a lot of creativity and heart in, again, not just how do we, just contribute financially, but what are some other things that we can do to change the current circumstance for people who are in a really dark time. No,
absolutely. Can't imagine. I have 2 daughters and they're perfectly healthy and never had, but I can't imagine some of the things that parents and the kids have to go through over there. So, yeah, I mean, if we can, when these concerts come up and so forth, I mean, we certainly want to do things that make sense for them. And we did the Taylor Swift, and we did, Mariah Carey back at Christmas time, I think. And yeah, it was very cool to see the kids and see them have such a good time. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It makes it worth it, right? You got to do something. Or at the end of the day, I don't know. Is it worth it even if you're not doing some good? Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and once you get involved with, I don't know, it's West Virginia's full of wonderful people, right? Maybe some of the best people in the world, and maybe that's part of it. But once you get involved over there, it's you just want to do more. It makes you feel so good, and those people are so wonderful. I mean, it's just you can't help.
And appreciative.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and then
they're deserving, appreciative, all the things you'd want, and you can go over there and truly see how you're actually making a difference. Whereas you might send a check to some other organization, and it's not tangible. You can go over there and see it.
Yeah,
really
firsthand.
Cool.
Yeah, which is really cool. So I'm sitting here listening to you, and I'm thinking about just this journey that you've been on and where you are now versus how you started out of school and going into the military. And I just am curious if you think about someone who's maybe starting out in a leadership role, the first time they've ever led a team or a unit or whatever it is, what kind of advice would you give to those people about what it means to be a successful leader?
First and foremost, right, I think you have to get to know your people. And that is the only asset you have at the end of the day. Machines, whatever the case may be, whatever your business is, right? But at the end of the day, those are your assets. You have to, 1, get to know them. 2, you got to take care of them. And when you figure out, you you talk about you have to inspire them and motivate. You have to inspire and motivate. And you got to find that. And sometimes what inspires and motivates this one doesn't work over here. You got to find that for them. So that's where you got to go. So you can't get that done until you get to know these people. You know, try to get to know them. Try to understand. Like we one guy has worked at mine for years. And all of a sudden his son just got into Penn State last year, and it's like, does anybody know this? This is a big deal for this family, right?
Yeah.
And so we called him out and celebrated it. But it's get to know your people and make sure that you know them and what motivates them. Again, some folks are motivated by different things, and that's the thing. And then the other one says have courage, right? Have courage. One thing that's easy for me to say and hard, it's one of my admitted failures, is communication. That is so hard today. It is. I think it's gotten almost impossible today, unless you have someone that is doing it. Because with social media and everything else, the expectations of instantaneous communication, all this stuff, and the conversation never ends, right? You can't just put out a statement. That's not the end of it. It just keeps going in the comment section.
You can't just send an email, then you get all the replies back.
And it's also a part of it, I think, is it's changed the way people communicate. Like if I told you in a meeting, hey, tell your crew this. That doesn't always happen because they're not used to communicating. Anyway, that's hard. So get to know your people. Take care of your people. Have courage. You got to have courage. You got to be bold. Be courageous. Don't listen to the group think.
Be willing to kind of stick your neck out.
Just follow the numbers, right? Do the math. Follow the numbers. They'll tell you where to go with the business. And also have the courage to, this is one thing I do pride myself on, is having the courage to admit when I was wrong. And also and I think this maybe is one of the most important things, is you don't have to have all the answers.
No.
Have the courage and the wisdom to say, I don't know, but that's a great question. And we were going to look into that, and I'll get back to you.
Exactly. And that's so huge. I'm glad that you said that, because again, as the CEO, many people would expect you, well, you just have to know everything and you have to be an expert on everything. And you're like, hey, listen, I'm not underground every day. These guys are doing it day in and day out. And I may not know the answer to that question, even as the CEO of this company.
Yeah, you just, I've spent enough time in the mine and with the guys to know that I have a level of appreciation for what they're doing. I have an understanding of a lot of the aspects of it. So when we're outside and we need to make a large decision, maybe $1 million decision, like I can understand the why. Whereas, if you don't and you haven't gone in there, you may think that's a waste of money.
Yeah.
And it's going to be really hard for you to understand and appreciate that decision, right? And so that's what I've done. I try to stay in touch with it and try to it'd be really hard if the business were much larger, right? I mean, I don't know how some guys or ladies pull that off, but yeah, you got to stay in touch with what's going on.
Yeah. Yep. And that is challenging. You're right. The bigger it gets, I mean, it's a lot easier when you have a one-person company, a three-person company.
Oh, yeah.
Although sometimes I don't communicate well with myself. I will say.
So hard.
But it definitely gets a lot harder when it's 700 or 7,000 and, how to.
It's something that I have struggled with. It's been one of my personal goals, and I've failed at it. I should fire myself for it, honestly. But I don't know. I have not came up with the right format, the right approach, right? I've thought about having our own internal social media, and all these things, but that doesn't get everyone. Not all employees have a device. No one has internet. It just is what it is.
Yeah.
But we've done quarterly newsletters and mailed those to people's houses, but still, something that was in that newsletter, and then you go to the mine like the next month, and somebody will ask, one of the guys will ask a question like, "Did you not read that?"
Exactly.
But anyway, we've done televisions out there. It's got constant PowerPoints, sliding on them with updated. But I don't know. I think some people just want to ask the question, and I don't know.
Yes, I agree. It's their 15 minutes of fame.
Yep. Yeah, it's something that I'm passionate about. It's communication, and depending on the size of your team, it gets harder and harder.
It does. You're absolutely right. Well, one of my questions was going to be something that you're working on to develop as a leader. So I'm assuming communication would be your answer to what it is.
Yes.
I don't know that anyone has ever arrived at the ideal state of communication. I mean, every organization I go in, that's their top area of concern. And it's tough. And not only because when you talk about the cascading process, so let's say you share with your team, hey, I need you to roll this message out. We're all going to filter it based on what's most important to us. And so you could say the exact same thing to 10 people, but I may be more focused on how that impacts the person and their feelings. And so I emphasize things related to that, whereas somebody else maybe is more numbers oriented. And so they're just kind of talking through the numbers. And so even though we're supposed to be delivering the same message, if we even deliver it, number one, the way we deliver it is different potentially. And then as you start continuing down the layers, it becomes a telephone game.
It does. And I mean, one of my latest ideas, actually maybe just having some town hall events. Because you have so many people. And then the other complication in this setting is, at the mine, it's 24/7.
Yeah.
Folks are working different shifts. We've got weekend warriors. We've got this. And, capturing all of that. It's not like we can just go out on the shop floor and say, everybody gather around. We try to do that. We call that a ramp talk, and we've tried to do that. At one time, we've had about 100, 150 of them at a time together. But then, you're in that people in the back don't hear, right? Yeah. It's all these things.
A lot of logistical issues with that.
It's tough. And so we were actually talking recently, like, you know what, we'll just have quarterly town halls. We'll just idle up. We'll pick a Friday, pick the auditorium, pick the venue. And I think that's what we're going to do next.
Yeah.
The other thing that I would say working on, struggling with, whatever it's just time management, Yeah. And I really struggle with, am I spending enough time with this team member? Am I giving them adequate focus? And am I hearing them out? Am I getting involved? And being an aggressive, I say aggressive, but being an entrepreneur, like I want to do it all. I want to do it all with them. I want to roll my sleeves up and get in there, and then I'll get dug in here, and I'm like, oh God, I got to go do this.
Over here.
It's kind of, I call it controlled chaos to some degree. Sometimes I am. But.
Yeah, but I mean, you have the additional responsibility of driving the business, moving it forward. So there's a lot of externally related activities that you have to focus on that most of your employees don't have to think about or worry about. I mean, they've got a lot on their plate, certainly just working inside the company, but you got to work on the business and in the business. And so that adds a huge factor from a time perspective.
Yeah. And I feel like, somebody has to be that, getting back to energy, I guess, but whether you're on a small team or a large team, somebody's got to be the source of the energy, right? That's driving this. That's going to be, and sometimes that's, my general counsel, Brian Settle's a good friend. He's really good about driving a process where, okay, we're going to have a weekly call every Friday. And when you told us that this is what you're going to do last week, we're going to ask about it. So that does really well of holding people accountable. And so there are things out there that people are doing, and that's the other thing, leadership, right? Always have your mind open to learn new things from anyone, right? Not just people that are above you or whatever, but you can learn a lot if you'll just listen, right?
Yeah, wow, and take the time to listen.
Yes, and first of all, have the mindset of I'm interested. My mind's open to learning new things, right?
Yes, exactly. I'm not just here to check a box or make you feel like I pretend care. Not that anyone would ever do that.
And I've got all the answers. And I'm
exactly.
No.
I'm just going to give you 15 minutes to talk through your thoughts on this so that we can all feel good about ourselves. But genuinely listening and being open-minded, I think, is huge.
It is. And you've got to be, bold. You got to have courage, and you're not going to be liked. It's not a popularity contest. Yeah. You're not going to please everyone. Yes. It's just not going to happen.
Yes. You can't make 700 and some people happy all at the same time.
And they're going to say things about you personally, whatever. That's not who you get out of bed for in the morning. Yeah. It's the 99% of them that are wonderful human beings that just want to provide for their family and do a good job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. All right. As you think about opportunities that you see around you, especially from a leadership perspective? I know that certainly what you're doing now you saw as a business opportunity and I'm sure a leadership opportunity, but any advice that you would give to people about areas that they can step up as leaders? I hear a lot of people saying we have a lack of leadership. People aren't stepping up and stepping into leadership roles. So I would just like to hear thoughts that you have around opportunities you see for people to maybe step up a little bit from a leadership perspective. And it could be in the business world, or it could be in their communities, families, teams, whatever angle you want to take it.
Yeah, I do think the world is void of leadership, right? There's a huge leadership void in this world, I think. But we got to talk about what is that leadership, right? I mean, you've got political leaders, for example, and I don't want to get into the politics, because you could go on either side of the aisle, right, and go all day about. But having political leaders or leadership where people will be honest and candid, I think candor is lost, right? Because we're really sensitive about But candor is not
honesty.
It's honesty, but it's not being disrespectful.
No.
I mean, respectful candor, that's what we need. People need to just hear, and that's something that I have done over the past 3 years, and it's good. I mean, certainly it's unpleasant. Some things you don't want to go out there and have to say. You don't want to deliver that message. I mean, it's not always fun by any means, but it has to be done. Yeah. People have to know what the facts are, and it is what it is. But yeah, so where can people step up? There's so many ways, right? You think of like communities, community leadership, local politics. I mean, there's a variety of opportunities there that I would love to see people step up. And it seems like when it comes to that, we've kind of gotten this society where not always everyone's so busy, right? You're busy running your business or working your job, raising your family, and all these things. It's really hard, but those that good people out there that can, I think it's awesome if they would step up and get more involved. Yeah, for sure.
I love that.
And just don't play. It frustrates me when you see the groupthink on both sides of the aisle or whatever the case may be. It's like, really?
You don't have to just follow the crowd and say what everybody else is saying.
Do you even understand what you're saying, right? Do you even know what that is?
Yeah. Have you looked at the facts, the real facts?
People throw me on the energy side, right? And then think of politics. We hear of decarbonization, electric. I'm like, do you even know what that is? Do you even know what carbon is? Like, I'm not sure most of them do.
Yeah, what contributes to it as well. Yeah. It's interesting. This has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming here. I know I kind of just took you on all kinds of different directions, but you were really good about just going with it and answering the questions. I do like to end with a lightning round.
Oh, God. Let's go.
Okay, good for the lightning round. Let me turn on my timer here. So it's 60 seconds to answer as many open-ended questions as you can about you. All right? Timer starts now. What season best fits your personality?
Summer.
Okay. What's your most used emoji in text?
I don't use emojis.
Okay. What book, song, movie, or podcast has had the greatest impact on your life?
Oh, my God.
That's a stumper.
I'm going to go with extreme ownership.
Yeah,
that's just hard. That just comes to mind.
It's a good one.
Maybe it's the setting.
What's something about you that surprises people when they first hear it?
Again, maybe it's just relevant, but when people ask, how did you get to where you are in this? I'm like, you're not going to believe it.
I just woke up one day in the pandemic. Yeah. Fill in the blank. I spend too much money on.
I don't know. Personally, right? Probably golf related stuff. Yeah. Whatever new gadget comes out, I think it's going to help me.
It didn't ring, but it's done. All right, we got it through. Thank you so much. Any last thoughts, comments that you want to make before we wrap for today?
I can't think of anything. Just incredibly grateful for all the, as I think about leadership, right? There's been countless leaders throughout my life, whether it was military or early on in my career or whatever, and just extremely grateful for those folks. And that's the other thing, too. You don't realize some of these leaders that are out there, and you might be you just never know what an impact some of these people are having. And you may not see it. And I regret not communicating that, right?
Yeah.
And I've tried to go back and call some of those folks and be like, hey, or write them a little note real quick. But I haven't. Communication, I'm working on that.
but I appreciate you saying that, because you're right. I think a lot of times, I always like to say leaders have incredible potential to have an impact and influence, and you get to choose whether it's a positive or a negative impact or influence. And I think sometimes we don't see, if we are trying to have a positive impact, we might not necessarily see it. And it may be someone who's left and gone on somewhere else, and we hear from them years later, hopefully good reports, but it's not always, it sometimes is a very thankless job. It's like parenting, sometimes can be a very thankless job, but at the end of the day, you might actually be having a bigger impact or a bigger or more positive influence than you realize on people. And I think it's worth doing.
I do too. And, it's hard when you're going through whatever phase in your career you are. Certainly early on, I was certainly impatient. I wanted to go conquer the world and do it tomorrow. But, looking back on some of those seasons of my career and my life, at the time, I really did not enjoy them, right? And there were times when I felt like I was complete failure and this was not going to work out. And there were some dark days. And but then you look back and I'm like, I'm so glad. I don't want to do that again, but I'm so glad I went through that. But
and I'd imagine that a lot or maybe all of those experiences really led to where you are today. Like if you hadn't had some of those moments, you maybe wouldn't be in the position you're in right now, or you wouldn't act the way you act right now had you not gone through those really hard experiences. I hear a lot about, which we could have a, probably offline conversation, because I listen to a lot of Navy SEALs and other individuals from the military, and just talking about people not experiencing enough hardship anymore and not having to go through difficult, challenging times and the impact that is having. And you don't want to wish hardship or discomfort on people, but at the same time, that's usually where growth happens.
It is. And the thing that I always tried to do when I was going through those, and I have a few of those experiences, you try to just be calm, be patient here. This is just that something will come up, so an opportunity will present. But while you're here, try to get, what are you getting out of this? Do your job and add value where you can and do all those things. But also, what are you learning from this? What experience are you gaining from this?
And you can always learn from everything, the good and the bad.
Even if it's sometimes how not to do something.
Right. Right. Yes.
Yes.
I mean, talking about leadership, I'm sure we've both had our, fair share of leaders that we would not want to emulate. And so in those situations, you're learning what not to do. And I can think of specific times in my career where I said, if I am ever in a leadership role, I will never do these things.
Absolutely.
I hope I never do these things. So sometimes that is the lesson. All right. Thank you again
Thank you for having me.
for doing this. This was awesome. And hopefully
you.
we can get you to come back and talk a little bit more.
Love to.
Very
Love
good.
to.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Until next time, shine bright, everyone.